Millionaire yells at a single-father waiter, but his reply leaves her shocked. In front of all. If you've ever been humiliated in front of strangers, if you've ever had to swallow your pride just to keep the lights on, then you already know a piece of Adam Carter's story. Before we dive in, if this kind of story moves you, take a second and hit that like button. It means the world and helps this channel reach people who need to hear stories like this one. Now, let's begin. The Marcello's restaurant on 54th Street in Manhattan was the kind of place where a single dinner cost more than Adam Carter made in 3 days. The ceilings were high and vaulted, dressed in dark mahogany and soft gold light. Waiters moved like shadows between white-clothed tables, and the air carried the mingled scent of aged wine and expensive perfume. Adam had worked here for 4 years. He knew every corner of that dining room, every habit of the regular guests, every creak in the hardwood floor near table 7. He was good at his job, not just competent, but gifted in a quiet way that his managers noticed and his colleagues respected. He read people, not in the cold, calculating way that some called emotional intelligence. Adam felt them. He noticed the tension in a man's jaw before the man himself knew he was angry. He caught the flicker of sadness behind a woman's polished smile before she excused herself to cry in the bathroom. He didn't know where this gift came from. Maybe from growing up in a household where silence was a warning sign. Maybe from years of watching his mother navigate moods the way a ship navigates fog. Carefully. Without a map, hoping not to crash. Tonight, a Tuesday in late October, the dining room was 3/4 full. Adam moved between his tables with practiced ease, a notepad tucked into his apron, his dark uniform pressed and clean. He was 36 years old, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that was handsome without knowing it. Strong jaw, tired eyes that were still warm, dark hair starting to silver at the temples. He smiled at the couple at table 12, refilled water at table 9, confirmed an allergy for the gentleman at table 4. This was his rhythm. This was how he kept the world turning. At 6:47, the hostess led a woman to table 6. Adam noticed her before he reached the table. He always noticed people when they entered. That was part of the gift. But she was the kind of presence that even people without his particular sensitivity would clock from across the room. She was young, late 20s, dressed in a charcoal blazer over a deep burgundy blouse. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that was precise without looking effortful. She was beautiful in a severe way, like a sculpture carved to impress rather than comfort. She sat without looking at the hostess. She placed her phone face up on the table before she'd even touched her menu. She exhaled once, sharply, like someone releasing pressure from a valve that had been building all day. Adam gave her a moment. He understood arrival, the transition from wherever a person came from into the seat in front of them. He finished a water refill at table 7, folded a cloth napkin, and then approached table 6 with the ease of someone who had done this 10,000 times. "Good evening," he said with genuine warmth. "Welcome to Marcello's. My name is Adam and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with still or sparkling water?" She didn't look up from her phone. He waited. "Sparkling," she said finally. The word was clipped final, the tone of someone who regarded the question as slightly beneath them. He nodded, unbothered. "Of course, take your time with the menu, I'll be right back." He brought the water. She had moved on to a second phone. She'd apparently retrieved one from her bag while he was gone, and was typing rapidly on both, her jaw tight, her posture rigid. He set the sparkling water down gently and asked if she'd like to hear the evening's specials. "I didn't ask for specials," she said, still not looking at him. "Absolutely," Adam said. "Just let me know when you're ready." He returned to his other tables. He wasn't offended. He had served hundreds of people carrying invisible weight. Divorces, failed deals, bereavements, exhaustion with no clean name, and understood that their sharp edges had nothing to do with him personally. He was a surface. Sometimes people needed to be sharp against a surface. 12 minutes later, she flagged him with a gesture that bordered on a snap. He came over. "I'd like the pan-seared halibut," she said, "but I need the sauce on the side, no capers, and I want the asparagus replaced with something green that isn't bitter. And I need a glass of the Sancerre, not the one on the list, the reserve. And I want it before the food, not with it." Adam wrote it down carefully. Perfect. The Sancerre Reserve, chilled. I'll also let the kitchen know about the capers and find you a substitute for the asparagus. Perhaps the broccolini, which is mild this season. She looked at him for the first time. Not warmly, the way a person looks at a problem they're deciding whether to engage with. Fine, she said. He confirmed the order and went to place it. He arranged the Sancerre first, sourcing the reserve bottle from the back cellar, presenting it properly, pouring the first taste without ceremony. She drank it without acknowledging the pour. He refilled it and stepped back. The food came out 22 minutes later. The halibut was perfect, Chef Renata's best dish in Adam's opinion. The broccolini gleamed. The sauce sat obediently in a ramekin to the side. Capers absent. He set it down before her. She looked at the plate. This isn't what I ordered, she said. Adam looked at the dish. Everything was exactly as specified. I'm sorry. Can you help me understand what's missing? I want to make sure we get it right for you. The sauce, she said, her voice rising with a sharpness that drew the attention of the couple at table 5. I can see the sauce on the plate, I said on the side. Adam looked again. There was a light brushing, perhaps a tablespoon, of the herb butter that had touched the edge of the fish during plating. A chef's habit, barely visible. You're absolutely right, he said. I'll have the kitchen prepare a fresh plate immediately. I'm not asking for a fresh plate. I'm asking why it's so difficult to follow a simple instruction. Her voice was fully raised now. The couple at table 5 had gone quiet. The man at table 8 glanced over. Is this a communication problem? Do I need to write it down next time? Is that what it takes to be understood here? The room had tilted. Adam felt it. That collective held breath of strangers witnessing a scene they hadn't asked for. He stood still. He didn't flush, didn't stiffen. His face remained open and composed, the way the surface of a lake remains still even when wind moves above it. I understand your frustration, he said. Quietly enough that only she could hear. And I take full responsibility. I'll bring you a new plate right now, and I'll make sure it's exactly right. You have my word? Something crossed her face. A flicker. Not quite guilt, but something adjacent to it. She looked at him as if she'd expected the surface to crack and was confused that it hadn't. Fine, she said again. He turned and walked toward the kitchen. Behind him, the dining room slowly exhaled, but as Adam pushed through the kitchen door, he felt it, that quiet thing in his chest that he had learned to name and not suppress. Not anger, not quite. A kind of sorrow, edged with something harder. He had been humiliated in front of a room full of people for something that was barely a flaw. He had absorbed it with grace. And somewhere beneath all of that trained composure, a voice, small, steady, asked the question it always asked in these moments. How long can a person keep doing this? He brought the new plate. It was immaculate. She ate without looking at him again. When she finally asked for the check, she reviewed it carefully, added a 15% tip to the penny, and stood. She picked up both phones. She didn't say thank you. She walked toward the exit in the same precise way she had entered, the way of someone who had never learned that the people in rooms like this were also people. Adam cleared her table. In the center of the white tablecloth underneath her wine glass, she had left a single business card. He picked it up without thinking. Victoria Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Hale Technologies, Inc. He stared at the card for a long moment. Then he tucked it into his apron pocket, not because he planned to use it, but because something about it felt like a loose thread he wasn't ready to cut. He had 20 minutes left in his shift. He spent them thinking about his daughter. Lily was 6 years old, and she was waiting for him. Outside the restaurant, the October wind moved through Manhattan like something that had places to be. Adam turned up his collar and walked toward the subway. His feet knew the route. 4 blocks south, 1 block east, down the stairs, the Q train, and his mind was already somewhere else. It was already in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on 87th Street, in a room painted pale yellow because Lily had chosen the color herself from a paint chip at the hardware store. Holding it up with both hands and saying, "This one, Daddy. This one looks like morning." He had painted it on a Saturday while she sat on the floor and handed him brushes and told him stories she invented as she went. That was 7 months ago. He still hadn't been able to repaint over a small handprint she'd pressed into the corner near the baseboard. An accident, she'd said, but her eyes had been delighted. He had left it there. He planned to leave it forever. The apartment on 87th Street was small in the way that New York apartments are always small. Not cramped exactly, but organized around efficiency, every inch carrying its weight. Adam had lived there for 6 years. First with his wife Sarah, then alone with Lily after Sarah left when Lily was 2. There was no dramatic story to Sarah's departure. Or rather, the drama had happened quietly, in the accumulation of silences and missed dinners and conversations that circled without landing. She had loved Adam, he believed. She had also loved a version of life that didn't include a baby and a husband who worked nights. She was in Seattle now. She called Lily on birthdays and sometimes in between. Lily loved her mother without complication, the way children love people who are mostly absent, like a book you've heard described but haven't read, full of promise, held at a respectful distance. Lily was also, and Adam did not say this as a proud parent says these things, but as a man reporting observable facts, extraordinary, not in the way of prodigies or extraordinary claims. She did not play piano at 4 or read chapter books at 3. Her extraordinariness was quieter, subtler, and in some ways more unsettling to witness. She noticed things. She noticed them the way her father noticed things, but more openly, without the layer of caution that Adam had built over years. She would look at a stranger on the subway and say, "That man is sad, but he doesn't know it yet." She would sit next to a crying child at the playground and say nothing. Just lean slightly close until the child stopped crying without understanding why. Her kindergarten teacher, Ms. Okafor, had called Adam in February to tell him that Lily had an unusual emotional intelligence, and that she sometimes worried it was a burden for her, that she felt other people's feelings too readily, absorbed them without a buffer. Adam had nodded. He understood. He picked Lily up from his neighbor Rosa's apartment at 10:15. Rosa was 62, a retired school teacher with white hair and an apartment full of plants, who watched Lily on Adam's evening shifts in exchange for Adam fixing things Rosa couldn't reach or carry. It was an arrangement born of necessity that had become something warmer. Rosa called Lily her little shadow, and had taught her to make arroz con leche and name the constellations. Lily was asleep on Rosa's couch when he arrived, a throw blanket pulled to her chin, her dark curls spread out on the cushion. Adam stood in the doorway for a moment before going in. He always did this. Took a second to just look at her, to absorb the fact of her, before the world caught up again. She was good, Rosa said softly, appearing beside him with a cup of tea she'd already prepared for him. She talked about a butterfly she saw at school. She said it was the same butterfly from last week and that it came back because it was checking on her. Adam smiled. That sounds right. He carried Lily home, her head on his shoulder, her small body warm and entirely trusting. He laid her in her bed and pulled the yellow comforter up and stood in the doorway of her pale yellow room until his breathing slowed. Then he went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and took Victoria Hale's business card from his apron pocket. He held it under the kitchen light. He was not a man who nursed grievances. His particular gift made that difficult, because he understood too quickly why people behaved badly, and understanding made anger complicated. But he was also not a man who forgot. What had happened at table 6 tonight had happened before and would happen again. That was the nature of the job, and he had made peace with it. What he couldn't entirely make peace with was what lived beneath the scene. Not the humiliation itself, but the particular loneliness he had sensed in Victoria Hale before she had said a single word to him. The sharp exhale when she sat, the way she had placed her phones on the table like anchors, the flicker on her face when he hadn't cracked. He had seen that look before, on people who had spent so long being hard that they'd forgotten softness was an option. He put the card on the table and went to bed. He dreamed of nothing, which was the best kind of sleep. Victoria Hale, that same Tuesday night, sat in the back of a black car moving through the lit corridors of Manhattan and stared at the screen of her primary phone without reading it. Her assistant Marcus had sent 14 messages since 7 p.m. Her board chair, Richard Donnelly, had sent two. A journalist from the Times tech desk had sent one, routed through the company's press office. The car moved. The city glittered outside the window. Victoria looked at none of it. She was 29 years old. She had built Hale Technologies from a 3-person startup in her Columbia dorm room to a company worth $400 million in 6 years. She had been in Forbes at 27 and on the cover of Fast Company at 28. She had given up sleep, friendships, holidays, and eventually her relationship with Daniel, a kind architect who had lasted 18 months before saying he felt like a footnote in her life and needed to be a chapter somewhere else. She had not cried when he left. She had cried once 2 weeks later in the bathroom of her office and considered the incident resolved. She was not happy. She knew this the way she knew most truths. Clearly, analytically, without sentiment. Happiness was a variable she had deprioritized. There were things she needed to do before happiness became relevant. The list was long. She was working through it. The car stopped at her building on the Upper East Side. She rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, entered her apartment, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that had been used maybe 40 times in 2 years, and stood at the window for a moment looking at the park. She was thinking about the waiter. This irritated her, but Adam kept appearing at the edge of her mind like a detail she had failed to categorize correctly. He hadn't gotten angry. People always got angry, or they got small. They shrank, apologized too much, retreated. Adam had done neither. He had looked at her with something she couldn't name, something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite patience and was somehow worse than both, because it felt like being seen. Victoria Hale did not like being seen. She poured a glass of water. She checked her messages. She worked for another 2 hours at her desk. When she finally lay down, she stared at the ceiling and thought about his voice. The way it had dropped, so that only she could hear. The way it had been absent of performance. I take full responsibility. No one said that to her. Not really. Not without wanting something. She picked up her phone and searched his restaurant. She found a review that mentioned impeccable service, especially from the tall waiter with dark hair. She read it once, then closed the tab. She lay in the dark for a while. Her mind kept returning to the moment he stepped closer and lowered his voice so the room couldn't hear, not to shield himself, she suspected, but to spare her. She couldn't explain why that unsettled her more than anything else about the evening. She did not sleep well. 3 days passed. On Friday afternoon, Victoria was in a board meeting on the 41st floor of the Hale Technologies building in Midtown, when her assistant Marcus appeared in the glass doorway and mouthed the words, "Family emergency." She excused herself. In the hallway, Marcus explained carefully that the call had come through her personal line, not the work number, from a woman named Rosa Delgado, who said she was calling on behalf of someone named Adam Carter, who had listed Victoria's business card as his emergency contact. Victoria stared at Marcus. "He listed me as his emergency contact?" she said. "It appears so," Marcus said with the particular neutrality of a man who had learned not to editorialize. "That's—" She stopped. "What's the emergency?" "He collapsed at work. He's at Mount Sinai. The woman said he's stable, but his daughter—" "How old is his daughter?" Marcus checked his notes. 6. She's at a neighbor's and the neighbor is elderly and can't—" He paused. "I think they just needed someone to call. The card was all they had." Victoria looked at the glass wall of the boardroom. Richard Donnelly was gesturing at a slide. The quarters projections, the integration timeline. The things that always needed her attention. "Tell Marcus to push my 4 o'clock, she said. Then she realized she was talking to Marcus. "Tell Richard I'll be back in 2 hours. She took the elevator down. She didn't fully understand why, until she was already in the car. Mount Sinai Hospital on Madison Avenue was quieter on a Friday afternoon than Victoria expected. She had been to hospitals exactly twice as an adult, once for a colleague's cardiac scare, and once for her own quiet episode of exhaustion that her doctor had called a warning, and she had called a scheduling conflict. She did not like hospitals. They reminded her that bodies had limits, and limits made her impatient. She found the right floor by asking at the nurse's station near the elevator. Adam Carter, she was told, was in a room down the hall, resting comfortably. He had experienced a syncopal episode, a fainting episode, likely due to dehydration and low blood sugar. The attending physician had run tests. He was stable. He would be released in the morning. Victoria stood outside his door for a moment. She did not know what she was doing here. Then she thought of the 6-year-old girl in an elderly neighbor's apartment, and she pushed the door open. Adam Carter was lying in a hospital bed with the look of a man who was more embarrassed than ill. The color had returned to his face. An IV ran to the back of his left hand. He had a paperback book open on the sheet beside him that he'd apparently stopped reading when she walked in, and he was looking at her with an expression that moved quickly from surprise to something more complicated. "Ms. Hale," he said. "Mr. Carter," she said, because she had somehow gotten that from Rosa's call. A beat of silence. "I didn't list you as my emergency contact," he said. "I left your card with Rosa, my neighbor, because I thought she might need it if something happened, and she needed to call someone from the restaurant. I didn't think she'd actually—" He stopped. He looked at the ceiling briefly. "I'm sorry. This is a significant overstep. You didn't need to come. Your neighbor is 62 and can't keep a 6-year-old overnight," Victoria said. "Where is she?" "Rosa has her. She can manage tonight. She just panicked when—" "I can arrange a sitter," Victoria said. "A professional, someone who can stay through the weekend if needed." Adam looked at her. "Why would you do that?" he said. The question was entirely genuine. Not defensive, not suspicious, or rather, it was both of those things, but underneath them was a real question, the kind that actually wanted an answer. Victoria found that she didn't have one, not a clean one. She had spent the car ride over drafting reasons, efficient reasons, logistical reasons, the kind she could file neatly, but none of them were entirely true. "Because your child needs someone tonight and you're in a hospital bed," she said. That seemed sufficient. He studied her. She had noticed this about him before, the way he looked at people, thorough and unhurried, like someone reading a document carefully before signing. "All right," he said finally. "If you're offering genuinely." "I don't do things I don't mean," she said. Something in his expression shifted. "No," he said with a quiet certainty that surprised her. "I don't think you do." She made a call to Marcus, who made 3 more calls, and within 40 minutes, a professional child care agency had dispatched a woman named Janet, experienced, background-checked, warm-voiced over the phone, to Rosa's address on 87th Street. Victoria relayed the details to Rosa through Adam, who relayed them in a calm, specific way that told Victoria he was good at managing crisis even when it was his own. Then there was nothing left to arrange. She should have left. She knew she should have left. There were 14 unanswered messages on her phone, and a board that was waiting for her and a quarter that needed attention. She stood near the window of his hospital room and looked at the street below and did not leave. "You don't have to stay," Adam said. "I know that," she said. He didn't push it. He picked up his book. She pulled the chair closer to the window and checked her emails, and for a while the room was quiet in a way that was— she would not have been able to explain this to anyone— genuinely restful. Not awkward. Not uncomfortable. Just quiet. "Her name is Lily," Adam said after a while. "I know. Rosa told me. She's going to be worried about me." He said this in the tone of someone reporting a fact he was managing carefully. "She reads situations. She'll know something happened, even if Janet says everything's fine." "Smart kid," Victoria said. "Uncomfortably smart," Adam said. And there was love in it. And something that looked like genuine wonder. Victoria looked at her phone. She looked at the window. She thought about a thing she had not thought about in a long time. A memory that came rarely and always without invitation. She was 7 years old, sitting on the floor outside a hospital room in Boston, holding a paper cup of apple juice that a nurse had given her, waiting for news about her mother that took 3 hours to come. Her father had not been there. He had been in a meeting. He had arrived at the hospital after the news, which meant he had been spared the waiting, which Victoria had always understood was something he had arranged on purpose. She had drunk the apple juice alone. She put the phone in her pocket. "Tell me about her," she said. Adam looked at her. "About Lily?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, deciding something. Then he began to talk. He talked about the pale yellow room and the handprint near the baseboard, and the butterfly that came back to check on her. He talked about the way she sang to herself while doing anything that required patience, setting the table, brushing her teeth, waiting for the elevator. He talked about the way she had started asking questions about stars, serious questions, the kind that required him to go find actual answers and come back the next day. He talked without self-consciousness, the way people talk about things they love without needing to perform the love. Victoria listened. She did not interrupt. By the time he finished, the room had gone from afternoon to early evening, and the light through the window had turned the color of amber. "You're a good father," she said. It came out simpler and more direct than she intended. Adam was quiet for a moment. "I try," he said. "It's the one thing I'm genuinely sure I'm doing right." There was something in that sentence that pressed on Victoria in a place she hadn't expected. The one thing I'm genuinely sure I'm doing right. She turned back to the window because she didn't want him to see whatever had appeared on her face. "What made you like that?" she asked, not turning around. "The way you handled what happened at the restaurant. Most people don't do that." "You mean when you dressed me down in front of 40 people?" he said. She turned around. He wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something wry in his face that wasn't anger. "Yes," she said. "That." He considered it. "I grew up in a house where losing your temper meant losing. My mother was the most controlled person I've ever known. She didn't come from money or education. She came from a lot of loss. Early and hard. But she had this quality." He paused. "She used to say that the only power anyone can't take from you is the power to choose your response." I believed her. I still do. Victoria absorbed this. "She sounds remarkable," she said. "She died 4 years ago," he said. "Pancreatic cancer. She was 61. I still talk to her sometimes in my head." He said this plainly without apology. Something in Victoria's chest contracted, not painfully, but the way a muscle contracts when it's been still too long and is suddenly asked to move. "I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you." He looked at her steadily. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why were you so angry that night before anything happened when you sat down? You were already—" He looked for the word. "Burning." The question should have felt intrusive. It was intrusive. But it was also the most honest thing anyone had asked her in months. And Victoria found that she was tired, genuinely deeply tired, of deflecting honest things. "I had come from a board meeting," she said, "where 3 men who collectively manage 15% of my company spent 40 minutes questioning a decision I'd spent 8 months building data to support. And they questioned it the way men question women who are right, not with better data but with tone, patiently, like they were doing me a favor by taking me seriously." Adam said nothing. "And then I came to a restaurant to eat dinner alone," Victoria continued, "because that's what I do every time a day tries to take something from me. I eat somewhere expensive and I work and I try to feel like the day didn't win. And I was—" She stopped. "You were already burning," he said gently. "Yes." Silence. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You do," he agreed without ceremony. "I'm sorry, Adam." He looked at her for a long time. "Accepted," he said. And he meant it. Victoria picked up her bag. The room had gone fully dim now, and a nurse had turned on the soft overhead light at some point without Victoria noticing. She looked at Adam Carter in his hospital bed, with his paperback and his IV and his absolute undisturbed calm. And she thought, not for the first time but for the first time with clarity, that she had not met someone like him before. "Lily is going to be fine tonight," she said. "I know," he said. "Thank you." She was almost to the door when he said her name. Not her title, her name, for the first time. "Victoria." She turned. "The card," he said. "The one you left at the restaurant. I don't think you meant to leave it." She had not meant to leave it. It had fallen from her blazer pocket when she reached for her wallet, and she hadn't noticed, and she had walked out without it. She looked at him. "Keep it," she said, and she walked out into the hallway, into the sound of the hospital, into the evening that had become something she hadn't planned for. We're past the halfway point now, and I want to say, thank you for still being here. The best part of stories like this one is that they remind us what we're all secretly hoping for. That being real with someone can change everything. If this story is moving you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Now, 2 weeks have passed, and something is about to happen that neither Adam nor Victoria planned for. The first week of November came in cold and gray, the way Manhattan Novembers always did. Not dramatically, just quietly, like the city pulling a coat around itself. Adam worked his shifts. He picked Lily up from school. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He fixed the leaky faucet in Rosa's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, while Lily sat on Rosa's counter and explained to them both, at length, the difference between caterpillars and moths, which she had apparently researched at the school library, with a focus that Ms. Okafor had described in a note home as impressive and slightly alarming. Life was as it had always been, except that it wasn't quite. Adam had worked at Marcello's for 4 years without once having a guest follow up after a difficult night. The business card sat on his kitchen table for 3 days before he moved it to the windowsill, then to the small dish near the door where he kept his keys. He didn't examine why he kept relocating it instead of throwing it away. He was good at not examining certain things. On the 9th of November, a Tuesday, Victoria Hale walked back into Marcello's. Adam was at table 3 when she came in. He registered her the same way he always registered arrivals, peripherally, precisely, and then looked again, because the second look confirmed what the first had suggested, and he needed a moment to decide what to do with that information. She was alone. She was wearing a different coat this time, charcoal wool, long, and she looked less armored than she had the first night. Or perhaps he was simply better at reading the armor now. The hostess led her to table 9. Not his section. He went about his work. He told himself this was fine and uncomplicated and meant nothing. He refilled water at table 4. He checked in on the couple celebrating something at table 2, who were sharing a dessert and whispering and not looking at each other the way people look at each other when they are very much in love and very aware of it. He delivered a check. He folded a napkin. At 7:12, his colleague Petra appeared at his elbow. "The woman at table 9 asked if you were working tonight," Petra said, in the neutral tone of someone delivering a message they had no opinion on. Adam looked at Petra. "She asked for you specifically," Petra added with the same careful neutrality. "I told her you were in section 2, but I could check." "I'll go over," Adam said. Victoria looked up when he approached. She had a glass of still water in front of her and her menus were closed, which meant she already knew what she wanted, or had decided not to need them. Her expression was composed in the way of someone who had rehearsed composure. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Ms. Hale." He paused. "This is a surprise." "I was in the neighborhood," she said. He waited. "That's not entirely true," she said. "I had a dinner meeting at 11 Madison that ended early and She stopped. "I wanted to come back. I'm not entirely sure why I'm telling you that." "Because you don't like dishonesty," he said. Simply. Something shifted in her face. "No, I don't." He took her order. She asked for the halibut again, and when he noted that detail without commenting on it, she almost smiled, and he arranged for Petra to cover his section for 20 minutes, and sat in the brief gap in his duties thinking about what exactly was happening here. He did not have a clear answer. He was a 36-year-old waiter with a 6-year-old daughter and a kitchen table that wobbled and a life organized around tight margins. She was a 29-year-old CEO with a $400 million company and a 23rd floor apartment. The distance between those two coordinates was not small. He was not a man who ignored distances, but he was also not a man who lied to himself, and the truth was that he had thought about her, not in a way he'd acted on or planned to act on, but in the way you think about a piece of music you heard once and can't quite reconstruct but also can't entirely forget. He served her dinner. He checked in twice. The third time she stopped him. "Do you ever bring your daughter here?" she asked. The question caught him sideways. "Sometimes." On Saturdays when my manager lets her sit at the end of the bar. She drinks ginger ale and draws on the order pads. Victoria absorbed this. She sounds like someone I'd like to meet, she said, and then appeared briefly surprised by her own words. Adam looked at her carefully. She's 6 years old, and she will tell you exactly what she thinks of you within 4 minutes of meeting you, he said. Fair warning. I'm not afraid of honesty, Victoria said. You say that, he said, but Lily is a different category. That Saturday, Adam's manager, a broad-shouldered, good-humored man named Dennis, who had known Adam for 4 years and asked no unnecessary questions, allowed Lily to occupy her usual stool at the far end of the service bar. She arrived at 4:30 in her green coat and her backpack shaped like a turtle, and she arranged her colored pencils in a row with the precision of someone setting up a workstation, and she began to draw. Victoria arrived at 5. She had not been invited exactly. Adam had mentioned with careful casualness that Lily was usually there on Saturdays around that time. Victoria had said nothing in response. And then she had come. Adam watched from across the room as Victoria approached the bar. He watched Lily look up from her drawing, a complex landscape involving what appeared to be a castle, 3 horses, and a figure he recognized as himself in his waiter's apron, and study Victoria with the full, unhurried attention that made adults uncomfortable. Hi, Lily said. Hi, Victoria said. She sat on the stool beside Lily. That's a very good castle. It's not finished, Lily said. The moat needs water. I haven't decided what color water is. Blue, Victoria said, but with some green in it. Water is never just one color. Lily considered this seriously. That's true, she said, and selected 2 pencils. Victoria watched her add the water. The blue pencil moved in long strokes, the green in short ones, the way real water layers over itself. The result was imperfect and alive. That's beautiful, Victoria said. Lily examined it. The green is a little too much on the left, but water is allowed to be uneven. She said it with the authority of someone who had thought the question through. Adam served tables. He kept them in his peripheral vision. He watched Lily show Victoria her other drawings. There were 6. Accumulated over previous Saturdays, kept in a folded section of her backpack. He watched Victoria look at each one with genuine attention, not the performed attention adults gave children's work, but the real kind, the kind that involved actually looking. He watched Lily notice the difference. After a while, Lily set down her pencil. She looked at Victoria directly in the way she looked at people when she had decided something. You were alone before, Lily said. Victoria went still. What do you mean? Before you came here, Lily said. You were alone for a long time. It was not a question. Her voice was the voice of a child stating a plain fact about the weather. The bar was quiet. The nearest customers were 6 feet away and not paying attention. Victoria looked at this 6-year-old girl with her turtle backpack and her colored pencils, and for a moment her face was entirely unguarded, the way a face goes when something true hits it from a direction it wasn't defending. Yes, Victoria said quietly. I was. Lily nodded as if this confirmed something she had already known, and went back to her drawing. She added water to the moat, blue, with careful strokes of green. Victoria looked across the room at Adam. He was at table 7 taking an order he hadn't seen. She sat with what the child had said, turning it over in the way she turned over problems, carefully from all angles, and felt something shift in the architecture of how she understood her own life. She stayed until Adam's shift ended at 7. She did not plan to. She simply did not leave. In the car afterward, on the way uptown, she got a call from Richard Donnelly. Victoria, he said in the tone he used when the conversation was not going to be pleasant, we need to talk about your focus. There are concerns being raised at the board level. I think you should come in Monday morning, early. Don't go anywhere. We are right at the edge of the biggest turn in this story, the moment where everything Adam and Victoria have been building toward either holds or breaks. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been fighting 2 battles at once and not sure which one mattered more? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Here we go. Monday morning arrived with the efficiency of things that have been anticipated and dreaded in equal measure. Victoria was at the Hale Technologies building by 7:15. Richard Donnelly arrived at 7:30 with two other board members, Gerald Park and Susan Whitmore, and they arranged themselves on one side of the conference table in a way that was not accidental. Victoria sat across from them alone. She had not brought Marcus. She had not brought legal. This was a choice she had made on purpose, because she had learned early that showing up with reinforcements signaled fear, and she did not want to signal fear. Richard opened a folder. "We want to discuss the Q4 integration timeline," he said, "and some concerns about decision-making consistency over the past month." Victoria looked at the folder. She had seen this move before, the folder as prop, the meeting as theater, the real conversation hiding underneath the stated agenda. "Go ahead," she said. For 40 minutes, Richard and Gerald and Susan raised concerns. Each concern was specific, documented, and reasonable on its surface. Taken individually, none of them constituted a crisis. Taken together, assembled in the sequence Richard had chosen, they told a story. The story was, the CEO is distracted. The story was, the CEO's judgment has become unreliable. The story was, we, the board, are doing our fiduciary duty by raising these issues now, before they become something larger. Victoria answered every question. She answered clearly and with data, the way she always did, the way she had learned to do before she was old enough to vote, because clarity was armor and data was a weapon. And she had needed both for as long as she could remember. But beneath the surface of her answers, she was doing something else. She was listening to the space between Richard's words, the way Adam had taught her, without knowing he'd taught her anything, simply by being the way he was. And in that space, she heard something that didn't fit. Richard knew things he shouldn't know. Not major things, small things. Internal projections that hadn't been shared beyond her senior team. A vendor conversation that had taken place in her office with the door closed. A detail from a due diligence process that lived in a document shared with exactly 4 people. These details appeared in Richard's presentation, folded into his larger argument, presented as if they were conclusions he had reached independently, but Victoria recognized their origin. She recognized them the way you recognize your own handwriting, slightly disguised. He had a source inside her organization. She kept her face neutral. She answered the remaining questions. She thanked the board members for their time, which was a formality that cost her something, and she walked out of the conference room and into her office and closed the door, and stood with her back to it for exactly 30 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Adam Carter. She didn't fully decide to do it. Her hand did it before the decision fully formed. The phone rang 3 times. She was about to hang up when he answered. "Victoria," he said. Not Ms. Hale. Not hello. Just her name. Like a door opening. "Are you working?" she asked. "Day off. I'm at the park with Lily." She could hear faintly the sound of children and wind. "What happened?" she told him. Not everything. Not the technical details, but the shape of it. The meeting. The feeling of being maneuvered. The specific wrongness of Richard knowing things he shouldn't. She was not a person who shared problems. She was a person who solved them. Alone. In the efficient darkness of her own competence. But she was also exhausted, and she had had exactly one honest conversation in the past month, and the person on the other end of that conversation was the one she'd called. Adam was quiet while she talked. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said, "You're sure he has a source inside the company?" "I'm sure." "Do you know who?" "Not yet." A pause. Then, "Can I tell you something? It might be nothing." "Tell me." "About 8 weeks ago," Adam said, "I served a table at Marcello's. 2 men, mid-50s, the kind of dinner that's been expensed. They were talking, not loudly, but the way men talk when they think service staff aren't listening. One of them mentioned Hale Technologies by name. He mentioned a product timeline that matched something I'd read in a press release about your company. He also mentioned a name. Donnelly. He said Donnelly was managing the relationship." Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. "What relationship?" He didn't say explicitly, but the other man said something about waiting for the right moment and not moving too fast, and then they saw me refilling water and they stopped. He paused. I didn't know what it meant. I still might be wrong about what it meant. I remembered it. Why didn't you say anything? Say what? To whom? I'm a waiter who overheard a dinner conversation. I had no way to reach you. And then you left your card and I kept it. And then everything that happened at the hospital. He stopped. I think I was waiting to understand it better before I said something. Victoria sat down at her desk, down it. Her mind was already moving. Fast, systematic, the way it moved when a problem finally became solvable. The two men, can you describe them? He described them. One of them. She recognized him from the description before Adam finished speaking. Patrick Greer, a partner at Vertex Capital, one of Hale Technology's earliest investors. A man who had always been collegial, present at the right events, measured in his public statements. A man who, she now understood, had been building a position. Vertex wanted to acquire her company. Richard had been their instrument. Adam, she said. Yes. I need you to write down everything you remember about that dinner. Everything, what they looked like, what they ordered, what time it was, anything. All right. And I need you to know that what you just told me might be the most important thing anyone has said to me in years. A pause. On his end, she could hear Lily's voice. She was apparently explaining something to a pigeon with considerable patience. How are you? Adam asked. Not about the company, about her. Victoria looked at the window, at the city, at the life she had built alone, floor by floor, year by year, until it stood very tall and had very little in it. I'm better, she said, than I was an hour ago. She worked through the night. She pulled the documents. She cross-referenced. She called her general counsel, a precise woman named Diane who did not panic, and laid out what she had. Diane listened and said quietly, "This is serious." Victoria said, "I know." Diane said, "How did you find this?" Victoria paused and said, "A waiter remembered a conversation." There was a silence on Diane's end that contained a question Diane did not ask. The evidence, assembled carefully, was significant. Richard had been feeding Patrick Greer non-public information for at least 3 months. The goal had been to manufacture a crisis of confidence around Victoria that would make the board receptive to an acquisition offer, one that would benefit Greer's fund substantially and leave Victoria with a settlement package and a narrative about stepping aside to focus on new ventures. Clean, professional, designed to look inevitable. It would have worked. By Thursday morning, Victoria had enough to take to the full board. She called Adam Wednesday night. "It held up," she said. "I know," he said. "You don't know yet. I haven't told you what. I knew it would," he said. I knew you'd find it if it was there to find." She held the phone and looked at the ceiling of her apartment, the high ceiling, the beautiful ceiling above the beautiful empty room, and felt something she hadn't felt in long enough that she had to look for the word. Believed in. "I want to tell you something," she said. "All right." When Lily said what she said at the bar, that I'd been alone, I wanted to deny it. My first instinct was to deny it, and then I couldn't, because she said it so plainly without judgment, the way you say the sky is blue, and I realized. She stopped. "What?" "I realized she wasn't diagnosing a problem," Victoria said. "She was just saying something true, and no one had done that for me in a very long time." Adam was quiet. "That's her gift," he said finally. "She doesn't mean it as criticism. She just sees what's there." "I know," Victoria said. "She gets it from her father." Another pause. Longer this time. "Victoria," he said. "Yes." "Come to the park with us on Saturday if you want. No agenda, just the park." She looked at the ceiling. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." She put the phone down and sat in the quiet of her apartment, which had always been a silence that pressed, and found that tonight it pressed a little less. We made it to the final chapter, and I want you to know, what happens next is worth every moment you've spent with this story. Before I tell you how it ends, I need to ask, Are you the kind of person who believes that some people come into our lives not by accident? Leave a comment if you believe that. Because Adam and Victoria are about to find out whether they do. This is Chapter 6. This is where everything lands. Thursday morning. The 41st floor of the Hale Technologies building. A full board meeting. Called on 48 hours' notice. Victoria stood at the head of the table. Not the end. The head. She had chosen her position carefully, the way she chose everything. To her right sat Diane, her general counsel. On the table between them was a blue folder. Closed. Victoria had not opened it yet. Richard Donnelly was at the far end of the table. He had arrived looking assured the way men who believe they are winning always arrive. Gerald Park and Susan Whitmore were present. 7 other board members filled the remaining chairs, their expressions ranging from mildly curious to quietly alarmed. Victoria opened the folder. She spoke for 22 minutes without interruption. She laid out the timeline, specific dates, specific communications, the pattern of information leakage correlated with Richard's access. She named Patrick Greer and explained Vertex Capital's position. She showed, without commentary, the chain of inference that connected Richard's inside knowledge to its source. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She simply let the facts arrange themselves in the sequence that made their meaning inescapable. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Richard said, "These are allegations." "They're documented," Victoria said. "Your counsel will tell you the same." Gerald Park was the first board member to speak. He looked at Richard, then at Victoria, then back at Richard. He said, "Richard, I think you should consult your attorney before saying anything further." What happened next took 10 days, and Victoria was not involved in most of it, which was by design. Diane managed the process. An independent investigator was brought in. Richard resigned from the board on a Wednesday by letter, citing personal reasons in the language that is used when the alternative to resignation is something worse. Patrick Greer's fund withdrew its interest in Hale Technologies in a filing that was terse and explained nothing. The story, in the press, was brief and dry, a board transition, a strategic refocus, nothing to see. The story underneath the story was more complicated, and Victoria let it stay complicated, because the people who needed to know it already did, and the people who didn't need to know it wouldn't understand it anyway. On the Saturday after Richard resigned, Victoria went to the park. It was the 3rd week of November, cold in the way that was no longer an event but simply the temperature of things. The trees in Central Park had gone to their bones, bare and elegant against a low gray sky. Adam was on a bench near the 72nd Street entrance with Lily, who was wearing a red wool coat and was engaged in what appeared to be a serious examination of a stick she had found. She held it the way scientists hold specimens. Victoria sat on the bench beside Adam. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she said. "You were the one who remembered." "I was the one who overheard a dinner conversation," he said. "That's a long way from doing something." "You kept the card," she said. He looked at her. "I kept the card." They sat for a moment. Lily had moved on from the stick and was now approaching a pigeon with the patient diplomacy of someone who had been refused before and was trying a new strategy. "How are you feeling?" Adam asked. Victoria considered the question honestly, the way she had been learning to do. "Strange," she said. "I spent 6 years building something and I just spent 2 weeks defending it from people I trusted, and now it's intact. But it doesn't feel the way I thought it would feel." "What does it feel like?" "Like I won a fight I should never have had to have," she said. "And like the winning doesn't change anything that was empty before it." Adam nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was listening with all of himself, and not just the part that was preparing a response. "My mother used to say," he said, "that achievement is a room. You can furnish it beautifully. But a room needs people in it to be a home." Victoria looked at him. She was right. She was almost always right. It was exhausting. Victoria almost laughed. The almost laugh surprised her enough that the actual laugh followed it. Quiet and real, not the kind she produced in meetings or at events, but the kind that arrived without warning and had her own voice in it. Adam smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile with his whole face. Lily appeared in front of the bench. She looked at Victoria with the full, candid attention she gave everything. "You came back," she said. "I came back," Victoria said. Lily considered this, satisfying herself that it was true. Then she reached into the pocket of her red coat and produced a folded piece of paper. She held it out to Victoria with both hands, in the formal way of someone presenting something that matters. Victoria took it. She unfolded it. It was a drawing. Crayon on white paper, the lines bold and deliberate. Lily's hand was surprisingly steady for a 6-year-old. 3 figures stood in what appeared to be a park. A tall man in an apron, a small girl in a red coat, and between them, slightly taller than Lily but shorter than Adam, a woman with dark hair and what could only be described as a careful posture, rendered in charcoal gray crayon. Above the 3 figures, in Lily's large looping letters, she had written, U.S. Victoria held the drawing and did not speak for a moment. She was aware that her eyes were warm in a way she did not usually permit in public. She was also aware that it did not matter, that Lily had drawn this without guile, without agenda, without the calculation that adults brought to every gesture, and that the only correct response to something offered, that purely was to receive it the same way. "When did you draw this?" Victoria asked. "Last night," Lily said. "I knew you were coming." Adam looked at his daughter with the expression he wore when she said the things she said, a mixture of love and wonder, and the particular bewilderment of a parent who understands that they have produced someone who exceeds them. "How did you know?" Victoria asked. Lily shrugged, the way 6-year-olds shrug when an adult asks them to explain the obvious. "Because you belong here," she said, and then she turned and walked back toward the pigeon, which had apparently decided to take another chance on her. Victoria folded the drawing carefully and put it in her coat pocket, close to where she kept her phone, which was where she kept the things she needed to be able to reach. Adam said gently, "She's not usually wrong about these things." "I know," Victoria said. "I'm learning that." They sat together on the bench in the cold park, the 3 of them in the loose constellation that Lily had already drawn, and the city moved around them the way cities do, without pausing, without softening, without apology. And for once Victoria did not feel that she was moving with it, head down, alone, working through a list that never got shorter. She felt still, not the stillness of someone who has stopped, the stillness of someone who has arrived. There was something she had been meaning to say, and had not said because she had not known how to say it without sounding like a woman who said things that served her. She had been practicing, in the way she practiced things, quietly, privately, until they were ready. "Adam," she said. "Yes. I want to apologize again. Not for the restaurant, I did that and you accepted it and I know you meant it, but for the way I was. For a long time. Not just that night. For moving through rooms full of people as if they weren't people." She paused. "I think I knew somewhere that I was doing it. I just didn't know how to stop." Adam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I tell you something?" "Yes. The night you came back to the restaurant. When you said you didn't know why you were telling me the truth." He paused. "I knew why. Even if you didn't." She looked at him. "Because you were tired," he said. "Not the tired that sleep fixes, the tired of performing. And you sat down at a table in a restaurant and you realized, maybe for the first time, that you didn't have to perform for the waiter." He said it without irony, without self-pity. "I was safe because I didn't matter. And then I started to matter. And you didn't know what to do with that." Victoria looked at him for a long time. "That's exactly right," she said. "I know," he said. "That gift of yours is deeply inconvenient," she said. "Lily thinks so too." From across the path, Lily called out. The pigeon had finally let her get close. She was crouched down near it, one hand extended, perfectly still, the way her father was perfectly still. A patience that belonged to both of them. Inherited or learned or simply grown in the same soil. The pigeon did not fly away. Lily turned to look at them, her face lit from within with the pure specific joy of a child who has been patient and been rewarded. She said, "It stayed, Daddy, it stayed." "It stayed," Adam said. Victoria watched the small girl in the red coat and the pigeon that had decided to trust her. And she thought about a butterfly that came back to check on things and about a handprint in a pale yellow room that a father had left there because some things are worth preserving exactly as they are. She thought about a business card, left by accident, kept on purpose. She thought about the ways that lives can turn, not in the large, announced moments but in the small ones, the ones that look like nothing at the time. A woman orders dinner and leaves her card. A man keeps it. A child draws a picture. A pigeon stays. She reached into her pocket and touched the folded drawing. Us. She looked at Adam. He was watching Lily with the expression she had come to recognize as his most true one. Open. Present. Full of something that had no professional word for it and didn't need one. Thank you, she said. He looked at her. For what? For not cracking, she said. That first night. When I gave you every reason to. Adam considered this for a moment. Thank my mother, he said. It was her idea. Victoria smiled. The real kind. Across the path, Lily stood up slowly so as not to startle the pigeon, and the pigeon, having made its decision, did not startle. It simply stood where it was, small, gray, ordinary, and completely unafraid. Some things, once they decide to stay, stay.